Christian parenting.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast. We are Jeff and Tara Matson, a husband and wife team who is shrinking the integrity gap in our own lives and helping others do the same. I'm a leadership and organizational development coach, and Tara is a licensed marriage and family therapist.
We believe that if you have a following, you are a leader, and how you lead matters. Whether you are leading in the home, work, or community, we are bringing you biblical, clinical, and relational wisdom to help you in every relationship that matters most to you. None of us do this perfectly, but we are leaning into the reality of our humanity and profound wisdom of grace.
Let's be honest, having real and authentic relationships is kind of a buzz conversation everywhere we turn, isn't it? We all long for them, and yet many of us rarely know how to foster them. We get together in Bible studies, small groups, courageous girls groups, support groups, and it's groups galore. And it's easy to start feeling like these groups become a chore rather than a place for transformational healing. It's something that we look forward to. That's why we've invited Robby Angel, president of Trueface Ministries and author of the new book, The Cure for Groups, coming this May.
So prior to serving as president and CEO of Trueface, Robby served for over 7 years at North Point Community Church in Atlanta, Georgia, founded by Andy Stanley. In his role, Robby utilized Trueface resources throughout his various positions as the director of adult ministry, environments, and director of men's groups. Both Robby and his wife, Emily, have a history of working in the professional counseling work and aid work, where they served with Samaritan Purses in Pakistan and Myanmar, overseeing international disaster response teams. Wow, that's amazing work. I want to hear more about that, Robby. But with all this clinical and ministry experience, he settled in Dawsonville, Georgia, with his wife, Emily, and their 8 children.
Hey, welcome, Robby.
Thanks, y'all. It's good to be on here.
All right. Well, we're excited about the conversations because you're speaking to the heart of all that we do at Living Wholehearted as well. Robby, start by explaining to our audience a little bit more about how you parent 8 children. Just start there, please.
Well, you just lower your expectations, I mean, like the first couple kids, it's like no screens, eat good. You feel great as a parent. And then every kid after that, it's, you just give them a screen, call it a day. And if they survive, you feel like a winner, I mean, after a couple, it's like nothing changes. You have no time, no money, no energy. So it's like, what's another one?
What's another one? Oh, gosh. I love it. I would love to be a fly on the wall in your home. That's pretty amazing. So is Emily home full-time working in home? Are you guys both doing things outside the home and these 8 children are on screens all day?
Yeah, no, we survive, and she keeps us surviving. She is the one working in this season, and then I escape to go to quote unquote work. Yeah, she's home. She was Tara, she was about a month away from full licensure as a child therapist. And then we adopted twins, and they were in the NICU for about 3 months. So we jumped into parenting pretty traumatic, and she hasn't gone back since. And so we've 8 kids in about an 8-year span. So it's been a whirlwind. They're all 10 and under right now. So our dance parties are off the chain.
Yeah, I love it. And she's definitely using that expertise and training in loving your 8 kids so well and the needs of your adopted. So, well, thank you. And we met you through all our connections with Trueface Ministries and our friendships with Bruce and Bill, who are founders. For those who are not familiar with Trueface, maybe you can share the heart behind what you all do and why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So it's a 25-year message-based ministry that started with Bill Thrall and Bruce McNichol in Phoenix, Arizona, and a lot of consulting, coaching, teaching on theology and identity. And it's been around content and resources, and they hit the 25-year mark, and John Lynch joined the team about 12, 13 years ago. And as the guys were getting older, they were looking for a founder transition and a new president. And I had read one of the books, The Cure, about 9 years ago. And it gave language to how I had been wrestling with seeing God more clearly and seeing myself more clearly. That just led to a lot of freedom and clarity for me. So I was just a fangirl of these guys in Phoenix writing these books. And so I was reading everything I could get from them. And then I was building that into some of the discipleship stuff we were doing at North Point. And I think I sold enough books that eventually the guy said, "Who is this guy buying all these books in Atlanta?" So I got to know him, and I just love the ministry. And really the basis of the ministry is that people are stuck. We're stuck in our relationships with God, in our relationship with ourselves, in our awareness of ourselves, and in our relationships with others. You know, we bump into those walls relationally where we desire something deeper and we just don't know how to get there. And so at the end of the day, Trueface equips people to understand who God says they are and to experience authentic community, to go deeper in their relationships. And that's really complicated and really simple. And we hope in our DNA and our bones, just like Living Wholehearted, to help people experience those deeper relationships with God and others.
I love it. So explain what's the complicated part and then what's the simple part. Help us understand those two.
That's not going to be easy. So the complicated part of it is, you know, our engagement and ability in our relationship with God and ourselves and others has to do with how we see God, how we see ourselves, which is impacted by what we've learned and how we've been affected by our stories, our family of origin, our relationships with our parents, you know, all these components that affect how we view God. And how we view God affects how we view ourselves. You know, our identity, do we see ourselves through a shame lens or through a lens of an adopted son or a daughter of a loving father? And with that identity, who are we and whose are we and how do we live out of that with confidence or shame or fear? And obviously that affects our relationships with others. You know, can we really be known? Can we experience connection with others? Well, that depends. If we see ourselves differently by the way we see God, then I can't let you see me because that'll affirm that I'm a failure and you won't love me. So I got to keep you at a distance and I'll experience a depth of relationships that comes up wanting. Or if all those things go together, I can experience your love on a deeper way because I see myself with confidence in the way God sees me. And you start understanding the complexity of, oh yeah, God says, you know, Jesus says, love God and love others. That's it. And that's the simplicity part of it, is that, you know, most of everything Jesus taught and modeled was love God and love others. It's that simple. And but the complexity part is it all kind of works together and we all get stuck naturally at different parts in that equation of God, self, or others that affect the other ones. So that's the simplicity component of love God and love others. And it's really as simple as that. That's what we desire, how God's made us, what we long for. But it's really complicated to do the hard work on where the breakdown is, and therefore where we can experience more trust, more grace, and more love in relationships. That's complicated and simple. And I probably just made it more complicated.
No, you did a great job on it. I mean, one of the challenges that people get stuck in, we can get stuck in, is in performance, you know, based kind of Christianity.
That's right.
And that connects to the heart of Trueface message. One of the metaphors that you all use in talking about masks, and the masks that people will often wear as a means to look the part, if you will, with one another, and try to make themselves feel the part as if they could please God somewhere. Talk a little bit more about the masks and really the grace piece, the core of your message.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, all of us are wired and designed to experience love. We long for it. We desire it. And we long for a relationship with God and with others. And that's why the simplicity of the gospel is, and what Jesus talked about is, love others. And that is how you love me. And that's how people know that you're my disciples. And in understanding what love is the giving and receiving of needs being met. It's if Jeff, you and I trust each other, if I let you meet my needs, then I experience love. And that's not needs like help me wash my car or cut my grass. That's needs of like acceptance and belonging and being known, which are innate to all of us. Mm-hmm. Now, if I have shame, if I see myself as a failure, I can't let you in close enough because the cons outweigh the pros. The cons of you affirming my view of myself that I'm a failure and a screw up is too dangerous. So I keep you at arm's length distance and I settle for a subpar experience of your love for me as a friend and those needs being met. But and that's what we say a mask is. A mask is I will present to you the Robby that I think you will accept because I long for acceptance, and it feels safer to accept us, for you to accept me on a minimal level and the mask and whatever Robby I present to you instead of the real Robby. But if I have confidence in God's view of me as a righteous new creation with Christ in me, then shame takes a back seat. And I'm allowed to, in our friendship, Jeff, go, here's me, all of me. Cause I don't need your validation because I'm getting it from the Father. And so I can just show you who I am truly, warts and all, because that doesn't define me. And your response to me doesn't define me. And so in turn, you get to really know me and love me. And we experience a deeper relationship. And that's the difference of the mask and the pose and what I present versus the freedom and the depth of relationship that so few of us experience, but really what Jesus made possible for us to experience in relationship.
Well, that kind of freedom is rare, but it's becoming. We're seeing it happen more as we engage people with this in authentic ways. Now you wrote a follow-up book to The Cure, and that's The Cure speaks so much to the metaphors that you guys have used that of masks and the room of good intentions and the room of grace and that contrast. And it's a wonderful, wonderful work. The follow-up to The Cure that you've taken a stab at here is really the cure for groups. And this is you taking this to the streets, right? And how people experience so often community and relationships in a formation of a small group in the church kind of model, if you will. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Well, I kind of nerd out about this whole relational thing as you can get me excited and riled up as you did in the past couple questions. But I was actually paid to nerd out on this stuff because for about 7 or 8 years, I worked at a church where around the small group ministry, and it was a big church. And so, the depth, the spiritual growth, the discipleship mechanism of the church placed a lot of emphasis on that occurring through relationships in small groups. And that's where you can be known, where you can go deeper. And I was in a position where, you evaluate 100 groups, which is the hope for the church, the Big C church, the depth, the maturing of disciples through relationships of love. And out of 100 groups, I woke up thinking about and studying and evaluating, okay, which groups are leading to transformation and which ones aren't? Do we understand what makes a difference? Do we understand why those groups lead to that and those didn't? And the art and the science behind what groups lead to transformation and what don't has been just a desire and a passion of mine. And I experienced that in group counseling as well as a professional counselor. Some group counseling environments were transformational and some you hit walls. And so really spent about 10 years unpacking what those differentiators are between groups that lead to growth versus those that don't.
Well, let's hear some of those. What are some of those differentiator factors of groups that really led to transformation and those that where people were just in some ways, maybe even happy to let go of? I mean, which is just so common. We'd love to hear some of that.
Yeah. And I will say before we jump in there, it is rare to find a group that's transformational. And it comes back to the same thing that it's complicated, but also simple. And most of us have experienced small groups that are just kind of lame, right? I mean, we get into a group and it feels like a supper club or it feels like just a Bible study where you check a box. There's all kinds of examples of groups that just come up lame. And the hope is, and the passion is that God really has designed us to grow through the context of relationships. but relationships that actually lead to growth are hard to come by. So how do we make that easier for people? And it's before I answer your question of some of those differentiators, the key really is the core of a leader. The core of a leader, how we see God, how we see ourselves, and therefore how we can experience authentic relationships with others. Out of the equation of groups, I would say 60 to 65% of the equation is the leader healthy.
Okay.
And that is heavy lifting, and that you can't do that in a book or a training. But the cure actually speaks more to the core of a leader, their theology and their identity. And so this book, The Cure for Groups, is more of a practical training of best practices for that leader on the other 35%, which I think about 25% of the remaining 35% would be these best practices that the book unpacks. And then 10% is just, random variables that you can control. Crisis hits, natural connections happen. Those are the uncontrollable variables. But there's that component of the 25% of best practices, wisdom of leadership, the art. That's more of the art of leadership that we tried to decode into 5 components that really started differentiating the exceptional leaders that led to groups that I would want to be in versus those that just felt kind of lame. And we reverse engineered what they were doing after studying these groups. And it settled into really 5 different things. In the book, The Cure for Groups, we call it core components, 5 core components that differentiate the good groups from the lame groups. And it follows a metaphor just for memory of sailing. And the first one is the destination. Good groups determine the goals for their group. The second is the captain, the leadership of how to lead with intentionality and vulnerability. The third part's the crew. You're on this ship, on this journey, going somewhere together. What's the culture of the crew? And how do you clarify that and shape that? And the fourth is the ship. How do you design your small group meeting time for transformation? Because every group gets together for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, once a week, or twice a month. Are you intentional about your meeting time to maximize that time? And the fifth is the route. Are you planning ahead to get to where you want to go over 4 or 6 months at a time to plan for intentionality based on your destination and where you're trying to get?
Okay, I want to unpack all of those, but I guess I got to get the book. I am thinking a little bit about sometimes the tension that we go, okay, grace is this idea of just letting people be right where they are, letting God do the work in producing the fruit. And yet you're talking about intentionality and knowing where you're going and being a captain. So talk about that combination. How do you be a vulnerable yet intentional leader in these small groups?
That is an awesome question, Tara. And the answer is not easily. that you're spot on the tension of leadership of, let's think about our work. We value what we prioritize what we value. If we're put on a work team to accomplish some kind of project, you're going to clarify your goals. Your leadership is going to be important in setting a precedent. You're going to have a team dynamic that's going to make or break this working team or this project. You're going to have a meeting structure that's either going to be productive or not productive, with intentionality of how you facilitate your operating system of your meetings. And you're going to have a route. You're going to have like a base camp. You're going to have like a project management system over 4 to 6 months to help you accomplish your goals as a working team at work. Now, we say goals at work are important enough to do all those things. But then we go to our small groups, which we say is the most important thing, one of the most important things in our life, close relationships with a hope to grow spiritually. If we objectively said these are some of the most important things in our lives, why don't we treat it that way with intentionality and forethought and focus and study. No, we do those things for work. And then we go to small group and it's like, all right, what do you want to do tonight? And it's an afterthought. The intentionality is to really prioritize what we value, which is relationships that lead to growth, because we know those things are what we desire and what God's designed us for. And so really it's adding some intentionality to what that looks like in a group, and how you manage the vulnerability and the environment of grace with intentionality is not easy. And in the book, there's that's the art of leadership. For example, we could look at each of these and what that would look like. In the destination, how do you develop goals for your group that makes your journey intentional and worth your time, but at the same time, not, we're going to memorize 50 verses and move towards legalism. And then in the captain, how do you lead with intentionality and vulnerability? You can lead with intentionality and at the same time understand that you set the precedent for vulnerability as the leader that others will follow. And so how do you do that in sharing your story in a very practical way? If I can't share my last 10% with the group's not going to go there. So that's an example of intentionally modeling something that I want to emulate into the group, which is vulnerability. Or the crew, how do we create an environment and a culture, Tara, like you just said, which is grace oriented? Well, let's set a group expectation or a value to not fix each other, but to walk with each other. Okay. Just verbalizing that and clarifying a value to create a safe, high trust culture, married with a commitment to not fix each other, is a clear value and commitment that helps shape a culture just by speaking that and agreeing that as a group, to prevent you from getting into a fix each other type culture. And then the ship, how do you design your time and the route? Those are really the art of incorporating an environment of grace married with intentionality. That is the essence of what leads to transformational groups.
It's so good. And I know you unpack in more practical ways how that looks, but this, what I'm hearing you say, as clinicians who are trained to run, very deep, vulnerable, therapeutic groups, there's got to be structure and there's got to be boundaries, and you have to know why you're there to be able to feel like you can let your hair down to actually do your work. And so I loved how you said, like, even just naming this is part of our core values or our culture that in our small group is we're not here to fix one another. We're just let each other be where we're at. And that's going to be really hard for certain wirings and certain stories. And as the leader, if I'm hearing you right, the 65%, I've got to be the first to model that, like check that's my own pull to want, am I in this group so that I can help everyone be the best that they can be? Or am I in this group to walk with people wherever God's leading them? And let's watch and see what happens. So I love it's a both and, which feels very grace-based versus legalistic, or boundaryless can feel really scary for people and they don't know what the heck we're doing. So I'm going to hold my cards close. I'm imagining, Robby.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm curious about is, that you just described this, a lot of important components that require intentionality. Speak to the leader that, the small potential small group leader, the person who thinks I've been in small groups, but and maybe I'm supposed to lead one. This sounds like a really tall order. So how do they get started becoming that kind of leader? If 70% of the success of
65,
if 65% of the group success is kind of based on that feels like a lot of pressure, but speak to that. How do I take some ground to get started?
Well, one day at a time. Aren't we all on a journey of every day maturing into aligning our lives with our desires of integrity and character and deeper connection with God and others? I mean, I'm a mess, but every day I get to wake up and go, God, I need you to show up today to help me mature into who you say I am and who you made me to be and what you made possible with Christ in me. And we get to do that together, and we get to be on this journey together. And that's it. We're all on this journey. So regardless of where we're at, how we can do that together and steward the relationships that God brings into our lives, that's really the key. And whether we're 20% or 80% towards overcoming or maturing in different areas of our lives, the majority of it, 90%, is whether we can trust others with us on that journey. That is amazing leadership, not you have the answers. I don't want to follow anybody that has all the answers. I want to follow people that are inviting me into the journey as they continue to mature and to grow in who God's designed them to be. So it's inviting people.
That's refreshing. And just to say, thank you for that, because it does help people that might feel overwhelmed at the prospects of getting started. And it's just, I'm right there with you. Tara and I are right there with you. It is just something that we are grateful for each day to wake up. And we're on a journey of trying to live more authentically and through our brokenness, taking that to the right places. And my gosh, it's a process. So yeah, we don't really arrive. It is about relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you for that, Robby.
And all of us are going to jump in. A lot of us have found ourselves leading groups where we go, okay, I want to do, Jeff, what you just said. I want to journey with and invest in relationships that lead to personal growth, to spiritual growth. But then we just kind of jump in the deep end and tread water and go, okay, what do we do? Like,
right.
I mean, I was at a mega church that gave conferences on how to do groups, and it's simple and complicated. And so my hope is just to make it easier for people, that all of us are jumping in as leaders at different points in our journey. What are some tools to just make it easier and more effective, your leadership? And that's the essence of why I wanted to write the book, just as a tool and a training so that any leader, regardless of where they're at on the journey, because we're all leading somebody, if we want to facilitate some type of group, this just gives some practical best practices that make you look like a better leader than you feel like by making it easier for you to facilitate some really practical conversations and lead a group through an initial 5 to 6 weeks of conversations that answer a lot of these questions to get them on the table and lay a foundation for a group that you would hope to go to and that would be worth your time to go to. Because if we can do that as men and women, if we can make it easier to experience community that's transformational, that is the Big C church. That's what Jesus modeled. That's what he designed. And that's what we're all trying to do through shrinking the integrity gap and through counseling. We're working with people to experience relationships that lead to more growth and freedom and peace.
Amen. And so would you just end with some kind of a story, a moment in time? You talked about the word need and how we all long to have these relationships that meet our need. That's how we mature. And yet that word need feels like a trigger word for so many people. Like they're still kind of going, do I even have needs? Am I supposed to have needs? Is it selfish to have needs? Maybe end with a story of a time in your own personal journey, Robby, where a small group actually met a real need of yours and you saw transformation happening.
It was about 7 months ago. That's the first one that comes to mind. I was in my group. We do a hybrid married group, men's group, women's group, my wife and I. So we meet together as couples and then we break up for men and women and we kind of do a rotating basis. And then we try to get our families together once a month. And some of these guys I've been tracking with for a couple years. And it was about 7 months ago. And it's an environment where I've let them know my stuff. And Tim Baker, a friend of mine, I love the analogy. He says, when you're in your last 10%, when you're vulnerable, you give others bullets. And in sharing your last 10% and taking down your mask and really being known, you give them bullets, which means they can use those bullets to harm you, or they could use those bullets to protect you. And a lot of these guys know me better than I know myself because of that. I've given them my bullets and I've processed and trust them. And I was processing some goals in the past about 8 months ago. And I've always struggled with balance. I'm not good at saying no. I struggle with rest. And Dallas Willard says, the secret to spiritual formation is to ruthlessly eradicate hurry. I'm like, well, dang, I suck, because I have no idea how to do that. And I was processing with my group, some stuff going on, and I said something along the lines of, and after next month, it's really going to slow down, and I'm going to have a better shot of balance. I just got to make it the next 30 days. And Stuart laughed in love. He just chuckled, and I was like, "What, bro?" And then Jason chimed in, and Jason said, "Hey, over the past few years, we're just smiling because we've heard that a lot. There's always that season." And it was with complete love that they know me enough, but it led to some real paradigm shifting. Oh man, like I now see myself with a clarity that's greater because they know me better than I know myself. And the lie of it's always after the season, it'll slow down and I'll find rest and the balance I'm looking for. And they just kind of smiled and said, "Okay, we've heard that before. Good luck." And I was like, in that moment, it was hard. I mean, it's hard to get caught with your pants down and, to feel naked in front of people sorry, you can edit that out if that's too awkward of a metaphor. It's great. But like to be known, they see me and I'm like, "Oh, this is awkward." And y'all just called me out that I'm like, I have no idea how to find rest and all this stuff. But I felt so loved because my need was, I need to be protected from my predisposition and wiring that leads to busyness and hurriedness, which is not what I desire, of focusing on my wife and my kids and my, time alone with the Father to the degree that I desire. And that opened a conversation because they love me, that they protected me from continuing to lie to myself that it was just another season. And it opened up into 30 minutes of me asking questions and them going, "Well, this is what we've noticed and what we've seen." And I've made some real hard changes over the past 6 months, and I'm still struggling. And we talked about it last week in our group of where I'm at. And I was tempted to say the same thing, and I caught myself, and we talked about it openly. And that's a need of just growth, of being known, of being protected. They met a lot of needs in that time.
Well, I want to just point out the fact that I think you said you're leading this group, and here they are attuning to you, and you're allowing them to also influence you. And I just think that's a beautiful picture, great example. And that's true, right? You're leading the group, technically. You guys are fostering this, right?
Kind of. I think it started that way. Now it's just, we divide and conquer.
Yeah, that's the beautiful part of hopefully long-term for people. So
yeah.
Thank you, Robby. We just appreciate you. We love doing this kind of work with you and partnering in the lives of helping leaders experience the fullness of God's grace, and then helping them to do that with others. And you're doing that. And that last story was so beautiful, an example of appropriate vulnerability and balancing that with leadership. It helps others feel normal. And the cure for groups for our listeners will be a tool that is really going to help anyone, whether leading a small group in your home or staff, experience life beyond obligations and surface relationships in a way that a lot leads to transformation and freedom and some of the good fruit that you just even heard Robby share from his own life. All right.
Robby, can you help us know where people can find you and your ministry and where to get the book?
Yeah, the book comes out June 8th, but if you go to trueface.org, you can sign up there, put your email, and be put on an email list for promotions for when the book launches. Also on June 8th, so The Cure for Groups launches, which is a book that you could, if you are tired of lame small groups and want some of this stuff distilled into a way that would equip you to lead differently. It's really that for small group leaders. With The Cure for Groups, we are also launching Embark, which is a 6-part study and a small group guide to launch your group, which is a 6-part study that you can get and lead your small group through it. So you can read about it in the Cure for Groups, and then you can lead your group through Embark, a 6-part study, which is also going to launch on Right Now Media. We're partnering with them. So you can get it if you have a Right Now Media account. You can look up Embark or go to trueface.org to get some of those. But yeah, go to trueface.org and sign up, and we'll send you probably 2 emails a month just with free offerings and that kind of thing, or follow us on social media. That's probably the best way.
So good. Okay, so we'll put all of that in our show notes. And this month, every month, Jeff and I give away books of either our podcast guests or books that we think are going to help you be resourced as a wholehearted leader in the home, work, and community. And this month, we're putting together a bundle of Trueface resources. So you'll get anything from the package of the Cure for Parents, the Cure for Groups. We're going to add in maybe the Ascent of a Leader, but you're going to get a bundle from the Trueface resources. So go to livingwholehearted.com and join our email news list, and we'll only send you one.
Got it.
I'm teasing you. And if you want to be a part of this, Rooted in Grace, these ministries that are helping you to understand your identity as loved so that you can love others well. We're so grateful. We look forward to connecting with you next week on the Living Wholehearted podcast.
This podcast is powered by Living Wholehearted, Courageous Girls, and the Christian Parenting Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us in this critical movement of shrinking our integrity gaps between what we preach and live.